crossed the eastern ridge alone. No pack scent on her, no weapons, nothing.
The full moon had turned the color of bone. Not the soft ivory kind, the yellowed, ancient kind. The kind that shows up in old stories your grandmother tells you about nights when the laws of nature bend and the moon goddess stops being polite. It was that kind of night. Under it stood Alpha Ernesto Evans of the Shadowveil Pack, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, dressed in leather worn smooth from years of battles he had already won. He was not a man given to hesitation. He had built his pack on precision, on discipline, on the understanding that every decision carries a consequence. He was not prepared for what Tim Roll dragged through his border gates. A woman, barely standing, auburn hair tangled and damp, skin pale as river stone in winter, wearing the torn remains of a blue dress that had once been beautiful. There was dried blood on her collarbone, or not a battle wound, the kind that comes from a broken mate bond, quietly eating a person alive from the inside. Tim, Ernesto's most trusted warrior, was holding her upright with both arms. The woman's eyes were half open, defiant. Even now. She crossed the eastern ridge alone, Tim said. No pack scent on her, no weapons, nothing. Ernesto studied her face. He had seen fear before. He had also seen something rarer, a person who had already decided that dying was not an option, as no matter how close death was standing. That look was on her face. "What's your name?" Ernesto asked. Her voice came out quiet but clear. "Connie. Who did this to you?" Her jaw tightened. "Someone who thought I was nothing." Ernesto was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Bring her inside." But this story did not begin at the Shadowveil border. It began 3 months earlier, under a different moon, before a fire that was supposed to celebrate joy, and instead became the most painful night of Connie's life. It began with a ceremony, and a rejection, and the moment everything that should have been beautiful became ash. "Hey, quick question. How are you feeling right now? Because I need to check on you before we go any further. Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world to me. It is essential that we get your support through subscriptions, likes, and comments. So if this story is already pulling at your heart, please hit that subscribe button for us, smash the like, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It helps more than you know." All right, thank you. Now let's get back to the story. Every year, when the first frost touched the mountains and the moon rose at its fullest and whitest above the Thornwood territory, the pack gathered for the sacred moon ceremony. It was not a celebration of power. It was something older than that. A tradition passed down through every generation, since the time when the moon goddess first breathed life into wolfkind. Under the ceremonial fire, fated bonds revealed themselves. Golden threads, invisible to human eyes but felt bone-deep by wolves, would stretch between souls chosen for each other before either of them were born. Connie had been waiting for this night for as long as she could remember. She was 23. Dark auburn hair that fell past her shoulders in loose waves, or gentle brown eyes that people often mistook for softness until she stared them down in training. She was not the loudest wolf in the Thornwood pack. She was not the fastest or the most decorated warrior. She was the kind of woman who stayed late to help the elderly pack members carry firewood. The kind who remembered every person's name the first time she heard it. The kind whose loyalty ran so deep it looked, to people who didn't understand it, like weakness. It wasn't. But Alfredo Forsyth had never learned to tell the difference. Alfredo was everything a pack alpha was supposed to look like on the outside. Tall, with golden hair swept back from a sharp, handsome face, green eyes that caught firelight and held it. He wore his pack insignia on a dark jacket that said, without a single word, that he had never once questioned whether he deserved to be in a room. His posture was the kind built by years of everyone agreeing with him before he finished a sentence. He was also, as Connie would eventually understand, deeply afraid of anything that might make him look ordinary. The ceremony began just after midnight. Hundreds of wolves stood in a wide circle around the sacred fire. The air smelled of burning cedar and cold earth.
Approach the flame.
The elder Ernestine, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the keeper of pack history, and a woman whose silence carried more authority than most people's loudest declarations, stood at the fire's edge and called each mated pair forward one by one. When the golden thread pulled between Alfredo and Connie, the entire pack felt it. A ripple went through the crowd. Gasps. A few quiet tears from the older women who remembered their own bonding nights. The thread glowed warm between them. Unhurried, absolute, the way true things tend to be. Connie felt it like a hand pressed warm against her sternum, like coming home after a very long trip. She looked across the fire at Alfredo. For 3 seconds he looked back. Then his expression changed, not gradually. All at once, like a door shutting, he crossed the circle slowly, the kind of slow that is performed, not natural. Every eye in the pack was on him, and he knew it. He stopped 2 feet from Connie. I refuse the bond, he said.
Fit to be my Luna.
The fire crackled in the silence. While you are not fit to be my Luna. Connie did not cry. Not right then. She was too stunned for tears. She stood perfectly still, while the words rearranged everything inside her that had felt settled and whole. Alfredo turned away from her before she could respond. He walked to Brianna Cedillo, copper-haired, warrior-trained, every inch the image of a decorated pack fighter, and placed his hand at her waist. Brianna's expression flickered. Not happiness. Something more complicated. Like a person who has just been handed something they didn't ask for, and doesn't know how to give it back gracefully. But the pack saw what Alfredo wanted them to see, and the murmuring began. Connie stood alone in the center of the circle. The golden thread between her and Alfredo did not disappear. That was the cruelest part. Mate bonds, once revealed, could not simply be erased by a refusal. They could be severed, but severance required time, ceremony, or death. Until then, the bond would remain incomplete, unfinished, like a deep wound left open to the cold air. And it would drain her. She walked herself home that night, in the dark, alone. She did not look back. What the old stories leave out is the science of it. Suzanne, the pack healer, a practical, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a reputation for telling the truth when everyone else was being polite, sat across from Connie 3 days after the ceremony and explained it plainly. The mate bond is biological as much as it is spiritual, Suzanne said. Your wolf recognizes its counterpart. When that recognition is denied, your wolf's energy has nowhere to go. It turns inward. It starts consuming you. Connie looked at her hands. They had been trembling since the morning after the ceremony. How long do I have? Suzanne was quiet for a moment. Weeks if you stay in close proximity to him. The bond gets more confused the closer you are to the wolf who rejected it. Every time you sense him through the thread, his emotions, his presence, it tears the wound open again. And if I leave, the deterioration slows. It doesn't stop, but it slows. Connie nodded slowly. There's something else, Suzanne said carefully. Your wolf, I've been watching your symptoms, the way your energy collapses and then surges unpredictably. That's not standard bond deterioration. I think your wolf has been suppressed, not by injury, by long-term stress and emotional trauma. I've only read about it in old healer texts. She paused. If I'm right, you are carrying something inside you that none of us have seen in a very long time. Connie did not know what to do with that information yet. She filed it away and went to find her sister. Cheryl Hartwell was 20 years old, 5 feet 4 inches of controlled fury in a ponytail, and she had spent the last 3 days barely restraining herself from marching to Alfredo's door and saying things that would get her banished. She was sitting on Connie's porch when Connie came out with 2 mugs of tea. "I've been thinking," Cheryl said. "I know that face," Connie said. "That face scares me." "Good, because I'm serious." Cheryl wrapped both hands around her mug. "You cannot stay here, or you're getting weaker every morning. I've watched you grip the railing when you walk down the steps like you're 90 years old." "I'm aware." "Then you know what I'm about to say." Connie stared into her tea. "Leave, Connie. Leave the territory. Get away from the bond. Give your wolf a chance to breathe." Cheryl's voice dropped to something softer. "You are not nothing. That man is a fool, and fools have always been too small to recognize what's standing right in front of them." Connie set down her mug. She thought about the ceremony, the fire, the thread, the way Alfredo had turned away. She thought about Suzanne's words. "Something inside you that none of us have seen." "Where would I go?" she asked quietly. Cheryl took a folded piece of paper from her jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. "I found this in Ernestine's old records. There's a pack beyond the eastern ridge, the Shadowveil Pack. Ernesto Evans is their alpha. He has a reputation for being hard but fair. They don't attack lone wolves crossing their border as long as they don't come armed." Connie looked at the paper. "Ernesto Evans," she said. "Alfredo's greatest rival." Cheryl raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that a little bit poetic?" Despite everything, the corner of Connie's mouth moved. It wasn't much of a smile, but it was the first one in 3 days. And Cheryl held on to it like it was gold. She left on a Tuesday morning. No ceremony for that. Just a worn leather satchel with a change of clothes. A healer's kit Suzanne pressed into her hands at the door with the quiet efficiency of someone who has learned that worry is most useful when it takes a practical form, and her sister's arms around her for a long, wordless minute. "Don't disappear," Cheryl said. "I won't," Connie said. She meant it. But the eastern ridge was a 2-day walk from Thornwood territory, through dense forest that smelled of pine sap and old stone. By the first evening, her legs were shaking from something that had nothing to do with distance. The broken bond was working in her chest like a splinter being pressed deeper. Every mile she added between herself and Alfredo helped marginally. The way a window cracked open helps marginally in a room that's already burning. She slept against a tree root. She ate the bread Suzanne had packed. She kept moving. On the second day, the trees changed. The pines grew taller, darker, closer together. The air took on a different weight, older, wilder. She was crossing into Shadowveil territory before she fully registered it, which was exactly when Tim Roll stepped out from between 2 trees with 2 other warriors behind him. Connie stopped. She raised both hands. "I am not a threat," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Though I am unarmed, I am alone. I am requesting passage to your alpha." Tim was a big man, broad-chested, quiet-faced, with the kind of stillness that comes from years of discipline. He studied her for a long moment. She knew what he was seeing: torn dress, pale skin, the slight tremor in her hands she was working to hide. He made his decision in about 4 seconds. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I've been walking for 2 days," she said. "I can manage a little further." He almost smiled. Almost. The Shadowveil Pack compound was nothing like Thornwood. Where Thornwood was built for appearance, clean buildings, manicured grounds, the kind of architecture that announced wealth and power before you even got to the gate, Shadowveil was built for function. Stone walls, wide training grounds worn flat by generations of boots, buildings constructed low and solid against wind and winter. It looked like a place that had survived things. Connie respected it immediately. Ernesto met her in the main hall. He was taller than she expected, with black hair cut short above a jaw that looked like it had been carved with patience. His eyes were dark grey. the color of sky before a storm decides what it wants to do. He wore a simple dark leather jacket. No insignia. No ornamentation. Power, she realized, that had no need to announce itself. He asked her 2 questions. Her name, and who had done this to her. She answered both honestly. When she told him Alfredo Forsyth had rejected her before the entire Thornwood pack and left her with an incomplete bond, Ernesto's expression didn't change. He did not offer immediate sympathy. He did not make speeches about justice or loyalty. He was not the kind of man who filled silence with reassurances he couldn't back up. He said, "Bring her inside." And somehow, those 3 words felt like the most solid thing anyone had said to her in 3 months. The first week at Shadowveil, where Connie slept for 14 hours a day, Suzanne had given her herbal compounds to slow the bond deterioration, and the distance from Alfredo was already dulling the worst of it, the constant low-grade ache in her chest, the sense of her own energy being slowly pulled through a cracked pipe. Distance helped. Rest helped. Good food helped. What helped most was being around people who did not look at her with pity. The Shadowveil wolves did not coddle. They also did not stare. They passed her in corridors with a nod. They made space at meals without fanfare. There was a direct, uncomplicated respect for personal privacy that Connie had not realized she had been missing until it was given to her. Ernesto came to her on the 8th morning. "You're looking better," he said. "I'm feeling better," she said. "Marginally." "Marginally," he repeated. Something in his voice was almost amused. "But are you a glass half empty type?" "I'm a glass accurately assessed type." He did smile at that. It changed his whole face, made him seem suddenly younger, not softer, but reachable. "When you're ready," he said, "I'd like to know what you can do." "I'm a pack wolf, not a warrior." "Everyone here is a pack wolf first," he said. "I'm not asking for your combat record. I'm asking what you are good at." She thought about it. "I notice things other people miss," she said. "Oh, I'm good at reading a room. I remember everything I hear. I can talk to just about anyone without making them defensive." She paused. "And I don't scare easily." He held her gaze for a moment. "No," he said. "I can see that." He walked away and left her to her breakfast. She stared at the space where he'd been standing for a solid 10 seconds before she caught herself. It was Gina West who started her in training. Gina was one of Shadowveil's senior female warriors, compact, fast, with forearms that looked like they had been built personally by someone with strong opinions about hard work. She was not gentle in her methods. She was also not cruel. There is a difference, and Gina understood it. "You're compensating on your left side," Gina said on the 3rd day of training, circling Connie with the focused attention of a chess player evaluating a board. "Every time you reach, you pull back half an inch." "Why?" "Old injury," Connie said. "Dog, is it healed?" "Yes." "Then stop protecting it. Your body thinks it's fragile. Your body is wrong." Connie worked on it. She pushed through 23 training sessions in the following weeks, and somewhere around the 11th one, she stopped thinking about what Alfredo had said about her. Not because the words lost their sting entirely, but because she was too busy learning that her body was capable of things she had never asked it to do before. She ran faster than she thought she could. She held positions longer than she expected. She solved tactical problems in sparring that made Gina stop mid-correction to nod approvingly. "You're not weak," Gina told her one evening after training, handing her a water flask. "You've just never been in a place that believed in you long enough for you to figure that out." Connie drank her water and thought about that. It was one of the most grounding things anyone had said to her during those weeks, though it was delivered casually, was without any attempt to be wise. Gina was stating a fact, the way she stated all facts, directly, without decoration, and Connie held on to it. Jason Phillips, Shadowveil's pack strategist, was a different kind of teacher. He was tall, lanky, with reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of his nose and a habit of talking through problems out loud whether or not you were following along. He was also unexpectedly funny in the dry, or offhand way of someone who finds the world absurd and has made peace with it. He began teaching Connie pack politics in their second week of conversations, which started as her asking a question about territorial agreements and ended up becoming daily sessions that ran 2 or 3 hours. The mistake most alphas make, Jason said one afternoon, spreading a map of the regional territories across a wide table, is thinking power is about dominance. Raw force. The biggest wolf wins. Isn't it? Connie asked. Short term sometimes. Long term? He tapped the map. The packs still standing after 200 years are the ones led by alphas who understood relationships, trade, trust, who to call in a crisis, and who to leave alone. Connie looked at the territories laid out before her. Shadowveil sat at the center of several crossroads. She saw immediately why it was strategically valuable, and she said so. Jason pushed his glasses up. You know, most people look at this map for a while before they see that, he said. How long does it usually take? She asked. I didn't say, he said mildly, which was not an answer, and both of them knew it. She laughed. It surprised her, the ease of it. Laughter had felt very far away for a while. Ernesto was not the kind of man who spoke in long sentences. He communicated in observations more than declarations, and he had a habit of appearing at training or in the common areas without announcement, watching the way things worked rather than commanding them from a distance. Connie began to notice this in the 4th week of her stay. She also began to notice that he appeared, specifically, near wherever she was. She told herself this was coincidence. She told herself this several times. But on a cold evening in the 5th week, they were both in the small library off the main hall. Connie reading through healer texts Suzanne had referenced in their last letter, Ernesto working through territorial correspondence at the other end of the long table. The fire was low. The room smelled of old paper and cedar smoke. Can I ask you something? She said. He looked up. Why did you let me stay? You had no reason to. I was a stranger from a rival pack, half dead on your border. He set down his pen. You raised your hands, he said. You were barely standing, and you still raised your hands and announced yourself. Most people in that condition don't do that. They panic. They run or they collapse. He paused. You were thinking clearly under pressure. That's not common. Connie considered this. You kept me because you thought I was useful, she said. There was no accusation in it. Just an honest assessment. I kept you because I thought you deserved a chance, he said. Those aren't mutually exclusive. The fire popped quietly. Something shifted between them in the silence. Not sudden. It had been building for weeks, the way a season changes without you noticing, until one morning the temperature is entirely different, and you realize winter has already arrived. He reached across the table and, very deliberately, put his hand over hers. Just that. No words. Connie looked at his hand, then at his face. She didn't move away. By the 6th week, the golden thread of the incomplete mate bond had gone almost quiet. Not gone. You don't simply stop feeling a wound that was built into your soul, but it had settled from a scream to a murmur. The distance, the healing, the time, and perhaps something else, something she was not quite ready to name, had given her wolf room to breathe. She was sparring with Gina one afternoon when she felt it. A surge from somewhere deep inside her. Or not pain, the opposite of pain. Like something long pressed flat, suddenly straightening. Her wolf, her actual true wolf that Suzanne had said was suppressed beneath stress and trauma, stirred for the first time. Connie stopped mid-movement. Gina caught the shift immediately. What is it? I don't know, Connie said honestly. Something moved. Gina went very still. She was looking at Connie with an expression Connie had never seen on her face before, or not the measured professional attention of a trainer. Something closer to awe. "Connie," Gina said slowly, "your eyes just changed color." They sent for Ernestine. The elder arrived within the hour, unhurried as she did everything, but with a sharpness in her gaze that spoke of someone whose mind was working very fast behind a carefully composed exterior. Ernestine had been keeper of Shadowveil's historical records for 40 years. Why, she had read things that most wolves in the territory didn't know existed. She looked at Connie for a long moment, asked her to shift. Connie tried, and for the first time in her adult life, the shift came differently. Not the familiar lean auburn wolf she had always known, but something pulling at the edges of that form, something silver-white, pressing through like light through old cloth. Connie shifted back before the transformation completed. It had taken everything she had, as Ernestine was quiet for a very long time. "Child, your bloodline was not suppressed by accident. Whoever raised you, whoever shaped your environment, who kept you small. Whether they knew what they were doing or not, the effect is the same. You have been carrying a white silver wolf for your entire life, and nobody told you." "What does that mean?" Connie asked. "Not it means the moon goddess didn't choose you for Alfredo Forsyth, because she thought you needed a strong alpha beside you." Ernestine folded her hands. "She chose that bond because she knew exactly what would happen when he rejected it. She knew where the road led." Connie absorbed that in silence. "She knew where I'd end up?" she asked. "She knew who you'd become," Ernestina said. "There's a difference." Danny Williams arrived on a Tuesday morning, riding a horse that had very strong opinions about the pace Danny had set. Danny was Alfredo's messenger, a 20-something wolf with an honest face and the misfortune of working for someone who had none. He arrived at Shadowveil's gate pale and slightly apologetic, which Connie later discovered was Danny's default state when carrying Alfredo's correspondence. It was not, she noted privately, or because Danny agreed with the letters. It was because Danny was the one who had to hand them over. Tim Roller escorted him to Ernesto's receiving room. Ernesto read the letter once. His expression didn't change. He set it down and looked at Tim. "Call the senior council," he said. The letter was a formal alpha challenge. Alfredo Forsyth of the Thornwood Pack demanded the return of Connie Hartwell, though citing her as a ward of Thornwood under territorial law, a legal stretch so thin it was essentially transparent. Failing her return within 7 days, he challenged Ernesto Evans to the ancient Alpha trial of claim. The Alpha trial was not fought often. It was old law, older than any of the current pack structures. A formal duel between Alphas for a contested claim, witnessed by pack representatives from every major territory in the region. The outcome was binding, and it was, technically, to the death, though custom allowed for submission. Connie was told about the letter after the council meeting. She read it twice. She put it down. "He doesn't want me back," she said. It was not self-pity. It was an accurate read of the situation. "He wants to not lose." Ernesto looked at her. "You know this is about his image," she continued. "He publicly rejected a mate, and now that mate is alive and standing in his rival's territory, looking healthier than she did in Thornwood. That's embarrassing for him. The challenge isn't about me, it's about controlling the story." Jason Phillips, who was standing near the window reviewing territorial law notes, pointed at Connie without looking up. "What she said." "I know," Ernesto said. "So what do we do?" Ernesto's eyes met hers. "We prepare." The Alpha trial was set for the new moon, neutral ground, old law, witnesses required, 7 days. In those 7 days, Connie completed what she had been building for 6 weeks. She trained through mornings with Gina. She reviewed tactical maps with Jason. She sat late into evenings in Ernestine's small study, learning what a white-silver wolf was, what it had meant historically, what gifts it carried, what responsibilities came with it. She also spent evenings with Ernesto. Not training evenings, not strategy evenings. The quiet kind. The kind where two people who have been very careful about what they say to each other slowly stop being careful. What one evening he told her about his father, a hard alpha who had taught him that leadership was weight, not glory. That the best thing a leader could do was make sure the people in their pack never had to worry about whether they were safe. "That's why you let me stay," Connie said suddenly. He raised an eyebrow. "When Tim brought me in, you looked at me and saw someone who had no safe place, and you couldn't leave that alone." She studied him. "You're not cold, or you just don't explain your reasons." "Most people don't need my reasons," he said. "They need my decisions." "I'm not most people," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." He reached up and brushed a strand of her hair back from her face, the same deliberate, unhurried way he did everything. Her breath went still. "When this is done," he said, "I'd like to mark you properly, if you want that." The weight of the question sat between them. She felt her wolf respond, not the muted, broken response of the Thornwood bond, but something clean and full and undeniable, like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting for exactly this key. "Ask me again after you win," she said. "After we win," he corrected. She smiled. The trial ground was a wide valley on neutral territory, at the edge of 3 pack borders. Packs arrived in the hours before dawn. Warriors from 6 territories, elders, healers, witnesses. The torches were planted at the circle's edge. The moon was dark overhead, but the torches burned gold and warm. Alfredo arrived with 20 Thornwood warriors. He looked the same. Tall, polished, green eyes sharp in the torchlight. Brianna was beside him, in her training armor, her copper hair pinned back. She scanned the crowd when they arrived, and, when her eyes found Connie, she held the gaze for one long moment. Her expression was not hostile, it was tired. Connie filed that away. But Ernesto arrived with his council and his warriors, quiet and organized, the way water fills a room, evenly, completely, without any noise about it. He walked to the center of the circle and waited. The trial rules were announced by the neutral elder of the Ridgeline Pack, a woman named Pearl who had been running pack law for 35 years, and who read the legal text with the energy of someone who had absolutely no patience for drama in paperwork, even if she knew there would be plenty of it in person. The terms were confirmed. The circle was sealed. What happened in the next 40 minutes has been told differently by everyone who witnessed it, depending on which pack they belonged to. What everyone agrees on is this. They were evenly matched. Alfredo was faster. Ernesto had greater stamina. The fight went long enough that it stopped looking like a performance and started looking like 2 men fighting through genuine exhaustion. The blood appeared. Positions traded. The crowd that had been murmuring quieted to something tighter, the specific tension of a room where nobody knows the outcome. At the 38-minute mark, Alfredo had Ernesto against the circle's edge. And Connie stepped in. Not because Ernesto needed saving, because this was never only his fight. She walked into the center of the trial circle. Every warrior on both sides moved simultaneously to intercept. Pearl's voice cracked across the ground like a whip. "Hold!" They held. Barely. The rules of the Alpha Trial of Claim had one provision that almost nobody invoked, because almost nobody qualified for it. A claimed mate, one who possessed a bloodline of recognized standing, had the right to step into the circle and exercise independent choice. Ernestine had found this in the records. For Jason had confirmed the legal text. Pearl had verified it 2 days prior when Ernesto's counsel submitted the formal notice. Alfredo stared at Connie from across the circle. She met his gaze steadily. She had spent 6 weeks learning how to stand like she belonged somewhere. She stood like that now. "This is against tradition," Alfredo said. His voice had an edge that was mostly composure and partly panic. "Read the charter, Alfredo," Pearl said calmly from outside the circle. "She has standing." Connie took a slow breath and shifted. It didn't come gradually. It arrived all at once, like a tide that has been waiting offshore for a very long time. The white-silver wolf that Suzanne had suspected, that Ernestine had confirmed, that Connie herself had barely glimpsed during her 6th week at Shadowveil. It rose completely for the first time. The clearing went absolutely silent. White-silver wolves were not supposed to exist anymore. The bloodline had been considered lost for 3 generations. Most of the people watching had never seen one in their lifetime. The older witnesses, Ernestina's age, Pearl's age, had heard descriptions from those who had. No description had been adequate. Connie stood in the circle, her silver-white coat catching the torchlight until she looked less like a wolf and more like moonlight that had decided to take a shape. The fire around the circle's edge flared as if responding, gold and copper and warm, reaching toward her like something ancient, recognizing something even older. Then she shifted back. She was breathing hard. Every nerve ending was still ringing from the transformation. But she straightened. "I am Connie Hartwell," she said. Her voice carried across the silent clearing. "The moon goddess placed a bond between me and Alpha Alfredo Forsyth. He refused it." She let that sit for a moment. "I am exercising independent claim. I choose Alpha Ernesto Evans of the Shadowveil Pack as my mate and my Alpha." She turned to Ernesto. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not surprise exactly. Something deeper. Something that looked like recognition of something he had known for a while, but had not allowed himself to fully believe until this moment. He crossed the circle. He was not rushed about it. He stopped in front of her. And without any performance, without any audience in his eyes at all, he pushed her hair back from her neck and asked quietly, so quietly only she could hear, "Is this what you want?" "I told you to ask me after we won," she said. "We won," he said. She felt the bond settle into her skin, not painful the way she had always imagined it, but something entirely different, like a door opening into a room that had been waiting for her specifically. His mark claimed her gently, completely. And the broken fragment of the Thornwood bond, the cracked thread that had been draining her for 3 months, snapped clean and dissolved like frost when the sun finally reaches it. She closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 months, everything was quiet. The roar of the crowd came back into focus slowly, from 6 territories, a sound that she later struggled to describe. Approval, perhaps. Awe, definitely. Several people were crying, including Tim Roller, who would spend the following week insisting he absolutely was not, and whom nobody believed. Alfredo Forsyth returned to Thornwood territory that night. He did not issue further challenges. He was legally prohibited from doing so under the trial outcome, and even if he had not been, there was nothing left to challenge. The decision was made, witnessed, binding. What happened in the weeks that followed was perhaps the most instructive part of the story. His pack began to fracture. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way a dam fails. Not when the water hits it, but in the months before, when small pressure points go unrepaired. Alfredo had been a leader who prioritized image over judgment, and the Thornwood wolves had watched him make that calculation publicly at the Sacred Moon ceremony. They had watched the consequences of it play out across 6 territories at the trial. The question that settled in quietly, it in kitchens and training grounds and late-night conversations across Thornwood, was simple and devastating. If he was wrong about her, what else was he wrong about? His better warriors began requesting transfers, quietly, respectfully, but steadily. Jason Phillips would later refer to this as the natural result of a leadership culture built on performance rather than substance. He said it over a cup of tea in the Shadowveil library, and made it sound very simple. It was, when you thought about it, Brianna Sedillo was not a villain of this story. That matters, and it is worth saying clearly. She had not asked Alfredo to choose her. She had not schemed against Connie. She was a skilled warrior who had been placed in an impossible position, the chosen mate of an alpha who had made a choice for the wrong reasons, and she had known it, privately, almost from the beginning. The tired look on her face at the trial had not been guilt. It had been the expression of someone who had been carrying a weight they never agreed to carry. In the 3rd week after the trial, she requested a formal meeting with Ernesto. She arrived alone. She sat across from Ernesto and Connie, both, in the Shadowveil council room, and she was direct. "I have a proposal," she said. "Alfredo's strategic alliance agreements are in deterioration. His pack is losing key personnel. The neighboring territory to Thornwood's north has been pushing their border for 2 seasons, and he doesn't have the tactical relationships to address it." She paused. "Shadowveil does. I am proposing a formal peace agreement between Thornwood and Shadowveil, brokered through me as Alfredo's representative." Connie leaned forward slightly. "What do you want in return?" she asked. "A neutral residence in Shadowveil territory," Brianna said evenly. "For myself, I am, technically, still the Thornwood Luna. For now. That will be changing." There was a long silence. Jason, who had been standing in the corner being professionally neutral, said very quietly, "That would give Shadowveil trade access to the northern corridor." "Yes," Brianna said. "It would." Connie looked at Ernesto. He looked at her. This was, she realized, the first major decision someone was bringing to them together. Not to Ernesto first, to them, as Luna and Alpha, as the unit they had become. "What will need the terms reviewed by Jason and the council," Connie said, "and we'll need something from Alfredo in writing, not from you, from him." "I can get that," Brianna said. "Then we'll talk," Connie said. Brianna stood to leave. At the door, she paused. She looked at Connie. "For what it's worth, I knew from the first week that he was wrong." Her voice was even, not apologetic. Honest. "I didn't have the standing to say so in a way that would have mattered. I'm sorry I didn't find one." She left. The room was quiet. "Do you trust her?" Ernesto asked. "I think she's telling the truth," Connie said. "I also think she's very tired of cleaning up after someone else's mistakes, and she wants a way out." She considered. "Those 2 things can both be true." Ernesto was quiet for a moment. "You're going to be very good at this," he said. "At what?" "Leading," he said simply. Alfredo Forsyth signed the peace agreement 11 days later. But he signed it because Brianna asked him to, and because Brianna had stopped asking and started requiring, which was a shift in their dynamic that had been building since the night of the trial. He signed it because his pack's northern territory problem needed a solution, and his pride had run out of alternative options. He also privately spent a long time in his study that night, looking at nothing. But there is a specific kind of reckoning that comes to a person who has made a very public mistake, and then watched, over several months, all of the consequences of that mistake arrange themselves clearly in front of them. It is not pleasant. It is also, in the end, useful, if the person is willing to sit with it long enough to learn something. Whether Alfredo Forsyth learned from it is a question the story leaves open. History tends to be patient about those things. Dr. Danny Williams transferred to Shadowveil Pack 6 weeks after the trial and became one of Jason Phillips's most reliable correspondents. He was extremely good at reading territorial situations quickly and extremely bad at pretending things were fine when they weren't, which are, it turns out, 2 of the most useful qualities a messenger can have. Tim Roll stood up in front of the assembled Shadowveil Pack at the lunar ceremony and said, without any preamble, that he had believed in Connie from the first night, because someone who could still look you in the eyes when they were that close to the edge clearly had more going on than what was visible. He then sat back down and refused to elaborate, which was so exactly like Tim that the room laughed for a good 30 seconds. Gina West trained with Connie for another 6 months after the ceremony. Not because Connie needed it anymore, because Connie asked her to. "You're already past trainee level," Gina told her one morning. "I know," Connie said. "I'm not here to be trained. I'm here to train with you. There's a difference." Gina threw a sparring pad at her head. She was smiling. In the season that followed, Connie Hartwell Evans did something that nobody, not Ernestine, not Jason, not even Ernesto, who had believed in her from the beginning, had quite anticipated. She built something. Not in the way alphas traditionally build things, through challenge, through territorial expansion, through the accumulation of displays of power. She built through relationship. She visited neighboring packs with Ernesto, and within those visits, conducted smaller, parallel conversations with lunars and healers and pack mothers, the people who carried the daily weight of pack life and were rarely consulted about pack politics. She established a first-of-its-kind healer exchange program between 5 packs, where knowledge about bond disorders, including incomplete mate bonds, the kind that had nearly killed her, could be shared and treated before they reached critical stage. Suzanne ran the program. It saved, in its first season, 4 lives. Connie was not the loudest leader anyone had known. She was not the most dramatic. She did not make speeches when silence and action would do. She was the most trusted. And over time, in the way that real power works, not announced but accumulated, not demanded but earned, she became the most respected Luna in the region. The woman Alfredo had called not fit to be his Luna. The woman who had collapsed on a border gate with nothing but dignity and determination. That woman. On a night in the new spring, when the training grounds were quiet and the fires were low, Ernesto found Connie standing at the wall of the Shadowveil compound, looking east toward the mountains. He stood beside her. "What are you looking at?" he asked. "Nothing specific," she said. "I just like looking at places from a height. You can see how things connect, how one road leads to another." He was quiet for a moment. "When you showed up at my border," he said, "I thought you were going to be a problem." She looked at him. "I am a problem," she said. "The best kind," he said. He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him with the ease of 2 people who have learned each other's weight over months of standing side by side. The mountains were pale and distant in the dark. The moon was rising. She had stopped counting moons as markers of loss. This one was just beautiful. "Before we close today's story, let me ask you something. If you were Connie, if you had walked 2 days through cold forest, barely standing, to knock on a stranger's gate with nothing but your name, would you have had that kind of courage? Where do you think she found it? Drop your answer in the comments. I would genuinely love to know what you think. And before we get to the outro, if this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for Connie through every chapter, please take 30 seconds and support the channel. Subscribe. Smash that like button. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every single comment, or every like, every subscription, is the reason these stories keep coming. Thank you. Now the ending. Some people get lost because they've been given the wrong map. Connie Hartwell was handed a map that said she was a secondary character in someone else's story. That she was too quiet, too ordinary, too small for the role the moon had chosen for her. And she almost believed it, the way we almost believe the cruelest things we hear about ourselves, because they come from people we were taught to trust. But the moon is patient. It waited while she broke. It waited while she crossed a mountain ridge with shaking hands and no plan except to survive. It waited while she sat in a stranger's library and slowly, carefully, began learning that extraordinary things had been inside her all along. Not because someone put them there, but because no one had managed to take them out. Alfredo Forsyth thought he was rejecting a mate. He was, in fact. setting free the most powerful Luna his generation would ever know. And Ernesto Evans, who built his pack on discipline, on precision, on the understanding that every decision carries a consequence, made the one decision that mattered most on the night Tim Roll walked through his gate with a half-broken woman who still had the presence of mind to raise her hands. He chose to believe in something he could not yet see. That is the quiet kind of courage, the kind that doesn't make speeches, or the kind that changes everything anyway. Connie lost something that night at the Sacred Moon ceremony. She lost the version of herself that was waiting to be chosen. She became someone who chose herself first. And then, when the right person came along, who saw what she was worth, she chose him too. Some rejections are redirections. Some endings are doors. And sometimes the person who walks away from everything they knew comes back as something the world wasn't quite ready for. Well, remember that. Educational values, moral lessons and things to learn from this story. 1. Rejection can be redirection. Alfredo's rejection, though devastating, was the event that sent Connie toward the life she was actually built for. Not every closed door is a punishment. Sometimes it is a path correction the universe had planned all along. 2. Suppressed potential is still potential. Connie's white-silver wolf had been inside her the entire time, diminished by a stressful, but unsupportive environment, not destroyed. Many people carry gifts they have never been given the safety, space, or encouragement to develop. The right environment changes everything. 3. Leadership built on image eventually collapses. Alfredo's authority was built on how things looked, rather than on sound judgment. When his judgment was exposed as poor, publicly, before the entire pack, the foundation of his leadership began to crack. Real leadership is built on trust, not performance. 4. What distance is sometimes medicine. Walking away from what is hurting you is not weakness. Connie's physical distance from the broken bond slowed its damage on her body. Sometimes the healthiest thing a person can do is create space between themselves and the environment that is destroying them. 5. True allies believe in what they cannot yet prove. Ernesto took Connie in based on character, not credentials. Tim saw her courage under pressure. Gina trained her despite early limitations. But the people who changed Connie's life were not the ones who waited for proof of her value. They invested before the evidence was complete. 6. Unresolved emotional trauma can suppress physical well-being. This story is a fictional illustration of a documented reality, that chronic emotional stress affects the body in measurable ways. Suppressed grief, unprocessed trauma, and prolonged exposure to demeaning environments have real consequences. Seek healing. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. 7. Real partnership is built on respect, not rescue. Ernesto did not save Connie. He created the conditions where she could save herself. The best relationships, romantic, professional, personal, operate on this principle. Empower, don't rescue. 8. Your environment shapes your belief about yourself. Connie spent years in Thornwood being underestimated. She spent 6 weeks in Shadowveil being believed in. Or the difference in outcome was not about who she was. It was about the environment's relationship to who she was. Protect your environment carefully. 9. Healing does not always require the person who caused the harm to participate. Connie moved forward without a reconciliation scene with Alfredo. You do not need anyone's apology to rebuild your life. 10. What someone calls your weakness may be their fear of your strength. Alfredo called Connie unfit because she was, or in ways he could sense but not articulate, more than he was equipped to hold. This pattern is older than any story. Learn to recognize it when it happens to you.